This episode was recorded before the death of the director Michael Ferguson. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, get a special guest to choose their favourite things about a story, and I have to then guess what those favourite things are.
Hi there, my name is Pip Madeley, and I suppose I'm best known for being a Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, so if you're a fellow Doctor Who nerd on Twitter, then perhaps you might have heard of me. I'm taking time out today from babysitting my Vellans to watch one of my personal favourites. It's the classic 1966 William Hartnell story, The War Machines.
Well, welcome everybody. It's time for the last episode of The War Machines. So I would like you to get ready with your own machines. And we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1, go. So here we go. This is the last episode of the last fully surviving Hartnell story. Which this wasn't when I was a bairn, so what was? Was it the Gunfighters? How extraordinary. So I'm glad this got, and again, it's different, isn't it? It's a different colour scheme. So, episode 4. So I don't think I've talked enough about the fact that this predicts the internet. That was the sort of thing that you'd always use to arm yourself against people who say, Doctor Who's rubbish. You go, actually, it predicted that we'd have a female prime minister, as if somehow, you know, getting something right that turned out to be true was somehow a sign of brilliance. But it is an extraordinary thing that the first one, set in the modern day, predicts, you know, a worldwide network of computers, which, you know, I mean, it's had slightly more impact on our life than causing the quite slow building of a cumbersome machine or several. But it's it's a smart sci-fi idea, and tying in with the post office tower as well is nice too. And sort of communication superhighways that we now take for granted. Now this is quite Quatermassy, because Quatermass often told its stories via the media, and then Russell T Davies does it, doesn't he, with Aliens of London and things like that, and Trinity Wells and all of that. Whereas here we have Kenneth Kendall appearing as himself. He was a genuine newsreader. So this one is lovely. Always like it when real newsreaders appear as themselves, especially somebody as illustrious as Kenneth Kendall, who was very highly thought of. This is very reminiscent of the although there were speaking parts in Quatermass, the pub watching events unfolded, particularly in Quatermass and the Pit, which is a great way of sort of saying the nation is aware of this, and the idea that panic is spreading, and it's a great way of doing sort of exposition as well. Here we have a minister played by George Cross, named after the medal. But yeah, this is Doctor Who very much sort of with the movers and shakers in Whitehall. This is sort of yes, Prime Minister, the alien invasion. But yes, so I like the fact that they managed to get Kenneth Kendall in to play himself. This is Edward Colliver, who I think a friend of mine got in touch with relatively recently, but not seen him do anything else. Don't know anything about him. Is that a slightly broken thing he's got there? There's a bit of a hole in the top of his radio. But this is pretty grim, isn't it? Because don't the War Machines start turning on everybody now? Yes, because obviously, Votan, the computer, has decided that he can do without mankind. Now, that music is used in one of the cyber stories. Tomb of the Cybermen. And it's a lovely paranoia about, machines wiping us out. Interesting, the paranoia now is, what does this information superhighway do with our information? And are we, prey to, an invasion of our privacy, a control of us? Now, that is listed in the discontinuity guide as a mistake. That Ben knocks it's a wonderful book, the Discontinuity Guide, one of the first sort of syntheses of loving the show, but sort of highlighting some of its shortcomings. And it would show, it listed goofs, but it says that bit there is Ben knocking the end off the gun and sticking it back on again. No, it's not. It's a plot point. Ben drops the Doctor's ring, goes to give it to him, but the Doctor's chatting away, so he gives up, and he uses the ring. The ring is important later on, so it's not actually a mistake. Yours was the mistake, Discontinuity Guide, because the end of the gun doesn't get knocked off. The idea of the internet superhighway. All Wotan needed to do was really go on Twitter and wind people up by trolling them with Wotan 1692755 or whatever. Now, is he going to get? I think he does get killed now. That's pretty grim, yeah. Because the war machines are now going to start destroying us. I'm going to sneeze. I've got hay fever. No, I'm not. I wish I'd picked up on Pip's idea of the branding. Doesn't hide his purpose. Yeah, so the brainwashing thing is odd, because Major Green spent the whole thing sort of killing off slaves and all of that sort of thing, and so what, has he been sort of totally under the control of Wotan? But then he needed sort of Polly to say, the Doctor banged his head then, Polly to say, Wotan thinks this should happen, so it's the level of what's already been programmed into them by Wotan and what they need to be told by particularly by Professor Brett or Professor Crimpton, is never quite certain. Oh, dear old Alan. He was a fine Ebenezer pantomime guy, but he was also a sort of English, blazer-wearing English gent, cricket lover, utter gentleman, and very stoical. Taught himself to write again after his stroke, so that he could sign autographs largely for Doctor Who fans, though he did carry on as well. He didn't get much to do in this episode, but he was a nice fellow. Yeah. Gosh, they're all dead now. Because John Rolfe died last year too. Last year was Helen Curtis. This year, God, I'm a anorak-clad harbinger of doom. This is John Slavid, who's also in the massacre. But some of this scene is cut, isn't it? And this is where they have to piece bits of it together. That's beautiful quality, that film. So that bit of his... Oh, it's a Toby Ale, one of the few references to me in Doctor Who. So his final lines, I think, were originally... it was still him on camera. And this is Dwight Wiley, who's what's he credited as, radio announcer. He is also playing himself. Dwight Wiley was the first black radio announcer employed by the BBC. Went on to have an illustrious broadcasting career in Jamaica and Canada. But yes, made history, and also makes history here as the first credited black speaking performer in Doctor Who, I think. Although Julian Cherrier, who is Zephon in the Daleks' Master Plan, was of Indian descent. And I think Chris Cornelis, who's credited as a Saracen in The Crusade, but he doesn't actually have any lines. I love that shot of the war machine in the water with the bike. This film stuff is absolutely glorious. I love it. And there's a couple of prominent extras like Sam Mansouri, who's one of the delegates in Mission to the Unknown. But I think combination of speaking and a credit. It's Dwight Wiley, but you don't see him. So then you've got Elroy Josephs as Jamaica in the next story, The Smugglers. It's just interesting to note, that it's something that one comments upon in the 60s because it is such an infrequent occurrence or not an occurrence up until this point. But I'd just say that as a point of interest because you can't see Dwight Wiley, so some people might not know what he represented and who he was. But he also is a person who plays himself. Michael Ferguson's really interesting with his camera, isn't he? He'll start on people's feet, and he sort of. Oh, I think here's another cut. Yeah, so this quote, that close up of Wotan was originally a shot of Polly and Professor Brett, but because it's a threat of death, it has been cut. And replaced with a shot of Wotan. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to buy a science fiction series and they go, anytime anyone is threatened with death, we shall cut it. I mean, what do you expect to happen? God, I don't know how many murder mysteries were hacked to pieces, unlike any of the people in the murder mysteries who just disappeared off screen and nobody referred to their deaths. Hartnell's on brilliant form in this, and I'd quite like to see him teaming up with William Mervyn quite a lot. William Mervyn's one of those people who sort of always look the same age, but I think he was only in his 60s when he died. But I do like the combination of Sir Charles and Doctor Who. And it's interesting the sort of variation in quality we've got of some of this film. Some of it's quite grainy. That's a ropey shot. That is Mike Reed. Mike Reed from EastEnders. He does get a close up later. That is him on the left. Mike Reed from EastEnders played Frank Butcher. Was a stand-up comedian and a very recognisable figure in the UK for decades, especially sort of in the 80s and 90s when he was in EastEnders as a regular. But he was known before that. But he wasn't known at this point, where he's an extra playing a soldier in The War Machines. And another comedian, Mike Yarwood, who was extremely famous as an impressionist. Not a very good one, but the only one. Again, that's a bit like, a lot of things in the sort of 60s and 70s, if you were the only one, and he was the only impressionist. But anyway, he was huge, and his shows were loved and watched by many. He was supposed to be an extra in this, but he had a dentist's appointment, and he never returned from it. So Mike Yarwood was never an uncredited extra in Doctor Who, but if he was going to be one, it would have been in this story. I love the way that Ben announces himself as companion material. John Boyd Brent as the sergeant. He's one of the, so you think you've seen somewhere, actually hasn't done all that much, and I think stopped acting in the late 60s, or his last credit goes up to the late 60s, but he didn't die till 2005, and you sort of think, I wonder what he got up to, and I wonder if sitting there he knew that there'd be somebody like me who, if I happened upon him while he was mowing his lawn, would have been so excited because he'd been in Doctor Who. And he was around, as I say, till 2005, so he's sort of contactable. Somebody who could have had stories to tell, but we never did. We just missed a bit of Mike Reed there. I love these shots through the railings. Michael Ferguson's a terrific director. He knows how to make it look splendid. And this is fairly straightforward stuff. It's soldiers trying to put a box in a wrestling ring. But Ben has totally announced himself as a companion. Love the fact there's a phone box there as well. The newer phone box, the red phone box. But the War Machines are very cumbersome, but doesn't matter. Ben has announced himself as the hero there. And he's very pretty, isn't he? Handsome boy. But Ben is deferent to the Doctor. He's you're brave with Polly, but he also has a sense of duty. But he's also game, and does does the brave thing because he thinks he should. I love Ben and Polly. I do wish they had more of a stint. Really, I don't know quite why Innes Lloyd fell out of love with him. I think Fraser Hines as Jamie is great, and it was unfortunate timing for them. But I do think as a result we didn't get as much as we could have done out of, I think, a very underrated team, Ben and Polly. And I do hope that they got married and lived happily ever after. And I'm sorry that Michael Craze died relatively young. And I thought could have had maybe a better career. Hartnell has a great face. He's got a brilliant hat. And is full of beans. I mean, is not in any way seem like a liability, you know, seeing as he's actually gone in 8 episodes time. Although he was obviously he was poorly, but also he's not that old. Like William Mervyn, I mean, there are people their age now who are sex symbols. You know what I mean? Whereas these look like a couple of great grandfathers. But I'm loving the amount of film on this. I'd forgotten how much beautiful film there is. Carl Conway. He's used by Michael Ferguson in Ambassadors of Death. I like the verisimilitude. Verisimilitude alert. I use that word too often. Of all the sort of, you know, people on telephones in the background and there's lots of sort of stuff going on. But Carl Conway is in the Ambassadors of Death, but he's also in one of the first nudie films, when they had to do nudist camp films, you know, so it's not porn or anything. It was films, you know, set in a naturist place, so therefore you could see, I think, bums and boobs. It's the film that's shown at the beginning of Carry On Camping. They're all watching in the cinema. One of the stars of that is Carl Conway, and another one is Katie Cashfield, who's one of the Thals in the very first Dalek story. They're sort of extras, but they all get a credit in episode 7. So yes, Carl Conway did one of the first nudie films. He was also a pirate radio DJ. I love all the special sounds. Very good. Again, because no incidental music. This set's rather nice as well, actually. It doesn't quite convince you it's outside, but I think that's a slight lighting problem. But it's attractive looking, and it's an interesting backdrop because it's receding into the background with, I think, a cheaty perspective behind the metalwork there. Oh, before noon, that's a bit Police Squad, isn't it? A bit of back projection there for the zooming war machine, but no, that's okay. It's quite fun. We're back to the room where the two baddies yell the plot at each other. It's a bit of a waste of John Cater. I wish he'd done another Doctor Who because he's so good. Whereas John Harvey comes back. John Harvey as Professor Brett, who I think is very bad in this because he does bad science fiction acting. But he's really good in The Macra Terror, which Sandra Bryant is also in. I haven't got a clue what Votan is saying, unfortunately. I wonder why they went for a echoey whisper. That's belting along, isn't it? I know it's slightly speeded up, but that's all right. That looks good. No, that's fine. There's not really a Hartnell story like this. But I mean, yeah, look at, and I like the use of the post office tower as a sort of geographical motif to really centre it in the now. I always get a little thrill when I can see it. It looks giant, doesn't it, over London now? I mean, it wouldn't. It would have some serious competition scattered around it. So yeah, and Ben, continuing his quest to be a companion, goes to save Polly. Good for him. Why do they pronounce it Votan? Because it is with a W. And I did ask Michael for a second. I couldn't remember. But I remember when I first watched this, and because I'd always thought it was called Wotan. It did seem a slightly odd choice to say Votan, especially when it's an acronym. It's not called the Vil operated what thought and analog or whatever it is. It's called the Will opera. He does go quite a complicated route, Professor Crimpton here, to do that. And seeing as he was the one that resisted, I think it's slightly unfair that of the ones to die, it happens to be the person who worked the hardest not to submit. Now, doesn't he climb out of the way? Yes, you could just see John Cater getting the hell out of there because he didn't want to get squashed and blown up. But yeah, I think it's really slightly unfair that of all the if any of the characters were to sort of have a thematically appropriate death, it would perhaps be Professor Brett rather than poor old Professor Crimpton, who's just hurried back into place again. And oh yes, so well, that's a bit of a shame. So it's a fairly straightforward denouement, isn't it? The Doctor sends the machine to shoot Wotan. I mean, it's fairly plot-wise, it's pretty straightforward, but I don't think it matters because basically the pull of this episode is, war machines in London, or war machine in London, and the sort of worldwide thing going on there, which I think is all very cleverly portrayed. And here we get poor old Dodo's off-camera exit, which I think's a bit of a blow. Anyone been to that corner of London? I should go there, really. I'm sure it's been identified where it is. My geography's terrible. I'd have to look that up. Oh, and look at them. Don't they look great? I love Polly's costume there. Don't they look absolutely terrific? She looks brilliant in that hat and the sort of Bretonny shirt thing. I think they look just so modern and game and exciting and beautiful, the pair of them. I'd love to have I'd love to have more space adventures with them. And she's been sacked in a really callous manner, and you're never going to see her again. HMS Teaser. I've never noticed that before. So Ben's ship is the HMS Teaser. And I like the out of order little joke as well. So yeah, so Ben hadn't knocked the thing off the end of the gun. He's got the Doctor's ring. Isn't that why they go back to the TARDIS? Something strange about that police box. That was in one of the documentaries. Key. The ring, is it? Oh yeah, it's not the Doctor's ring. It's the Doctor's key that falls out of his cloak when he didn't knock the end off the gun. So that's why it's a plot point. Ben's got the spare key. Go on, Ben. It's your time travel. You're going to land back on the same day, on the most invaded day of the Earth. Because whilst this is going on, the chameleons are also trying, and the Daleks are there to kidnap the Doctor. So what a day! And love that. And then you have this funny look from two people. One of whom is Doreen Ubles, who was one of the tribe in the very first Doctor Who story. So she's in the first Complete Hartnell, and she's in the last Complete Hartnell. And it's revealed that the voice of Votan is Gerald Taylor, so we don't get the and Votan credit. But by God, I'm happy it was there for the first three. And well done, Gerald Taylor, because he's often inside a monster. Oh, Eric Meval, he was the music editor on The Prisoner. I think he's still around, actually. Because he was very young when he did The Prisoner, which surprised me. Yes, I've forgotten he'd done Doctor Who. But yes, Gerald Taylor, Dalek operator, but he's also Damon's assistant in The Underwater Menace, Baker's man in The Demons, and his best part, Vega Nexos in The Monster of Peladon, in which I think he's very, very good. But he got to do whispering Bob Wotan as well. So, well, that was a joyous. I still think it's a fairly thin plot, and I do think there is a little too much of John Harvey going, and now we are going to do this, and Curtis going, do this thing, but I like the modernness of it. I like the idea of the network of computers, Doctor Who in modern London, Ben and Polly, all of that. I do think the rest of season 3, or a lot of the rest of season 3, is more interesting. So I am sad that this does better in polls, which I guess due to it existing, but also I think it's probably more the sort of story most people want Doctor Who to be, and I'm aware I'm probably being slightly pretentious going, but I like the more cerebral, slightly duller and odder stuff of the Wiles and Tosh era. But I'm drawn to that. But I'm also drawn to a lot of it because it's missing and we can't see it, and I've always got a thing about conferring status on things you cannot have, because that's somehow more tantalizing and more tragic. So it's all based on feeling sorry for ourselves. So I've got to choose a thing about episode 4 that I like, and I've got to choose a thing overall. And I think because Pip mentioned that Wotan gets a credit, though he didn't choose it in episode 1, he's not going to choose that. So I'm going to do a bit of gamesmanship here, because I do love the fact, and I love an and credit. Did I say in the episode, my friend John Bruford and I always called the actor Paul Winfield and Paul Winfield, because in most things that he was in, he got an and credit. And an and credit is a very special thing, because it means you're not the star, but you're slightly different from the rest of the supporting or main supporting cast, because they sort of separate you out, and that's sometimes, for a famous actor doing a cameo, or just somebody who's got an important part, and I think it's all to do with money as well. They say, well, we'll pay you less, but we'll give you an and credit, so it's a bit more prominent, and blah blah blah. If you're a credits junkie, which I am, the and credit is a marvelous thing. And I love the fact that in the whole of classic Doctor Who, the only and credit is for a fictional computer. But Pip won't choose that. I think I'm going to choose the whole 20th century London, the very similitude of the actual, newsreaders and the sort of modern day army. I think I can have all of those things sort of wrapped up in a kind of contemporary action drama today thing that very much comes to the fore in episode 4. And my thing for the whole story is Ben and Polly. I love Ben and Polly. I think they look fabulous. I think they're great characters. I think they're both introduced in a really good way. They both get plenty to do. Polly even gets taken over, but she's established herself before that. Ben immediately announces himself as terrific companion material. I think they contrast so wonderfully with Hartnell. And I think there could have been a really special relationship there, with him being all sort of, old and he's not that grumpy with them, but the elder statesman with these two sort of very loyal. I quite like the fact that they're different, and they don't sort of go, "Oh, granddad, you're a bit rubbish," but they're actually, yes, we respect your years, but we also provide a youthful contrast to them. So those are my things. What are Pip Madeley's things that he likes about episode 4 and the War Machines as a whole?
Great thing number 4, and I'm afraid this is a bit of a silly one again, but hey, it's my choice. It's the bit where William Hartnell nearly smacks his head on the top of the War Machine in episode 4. It's just the sort of instinctive reaction. He swerves away from it. It's just so human and real. And I love the fact that they couldn't cut those things out in the 60s because, of time and money, tapes and all that. TV needs more of that, just a sort of really human touch. And, it's a good thing he didn't smack his head, of course, but it's funny to watch.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And this is his whole thing.
Okay, so last one, and if you've got this, Toby, I'll be amazed. My bonus choice from the War Machines, it's the absolutely ridiculous moustache that's been sported by the army officer standing in the background at Covent Garden in episode 3. He's got a stick as well. His moustache is so huge, it should have a credit of its own. And it even looks like a W. So I'm wondering whether Wotan actually gave it him. Maybe he was under the control of Wotan, because we know how much Wotan loves brand management. Anyway, yeah, that's the sort of nonsense that I love Doctor Who for, really. So there you go.
Well, I did notice the moustache, Pip, but I think I noticed it last episode, didn't I? Yeah. But I didn't choose it as one of my favourite things, but I do like the idea. Yeah, that's a hint that he's a Wotan spy, because he normally has his moustache like this. Normally his moustache is facing southerly, but since this morning when he started talking in a monotone, it's pointing to the sky. And that's what they should show at the end. If it was a real sort of X-Files Zimon thing, they'd show him in Whitehall and his moustache would be twitching, and you'd hear in his head saying, "Doctor Who is required," and his moustache would twitch, and they're still there in Whitehall. I like to think that yes, well, one of Wotan's military slave is still waiting for phase 2 of the War Machine building. Well, there we go. A story that I like all the black and white stuff, but I had a slight beef against. Not because I didn't like it, but because I think everyone else likes it too much. And what an ungenerous way to think that is. And that's what I'm trying to inoculate myself against in this process. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. And if more people like this than the myth makers, it doesn't matter. It's not going to make any material difference to anybody, even if, in my view, they're wrong, because I think the Mythmakers is just glorious. It doesn't matter, and I enjoy it, and I thought it was fun, and I think it's fine, and I could easily enjoy that without worrying about what's gone on before it, what's come after it, and how other people receive it. Listen to oneself. Bit of perspective is required. No, I enjoyed that, and I really like the sort of modern vibe that it has. And I say it would be nice to see more of Hartnell doing that, but actually the fact that he only really does it that time is sort of what makes it so special. I know this is the bit on the Empire State Building in the Chase, which is probably today, and there's Planet of Giants, but everybody's small. But that's really the yes. So they qualify, but I think this one is this is self-consciously modern in a way that I think other Doctor Who prior to that sought to be, a contrast, otherworldly or backwards in time. Whereas actually in this one, the contrast with the modern day is the Doctor himself, and he looks absolutely great. I wonder if he had some psychic paper, and that's what we didn't see. That's got to be what we didn't see, because he just walks into the post office tower. And I quite like the chutzpah of that, of just going, well, let's not bother with him having to sort of talk his way into it. It's just Doctor Who. So look, and is he Doctor Who? Again, that's up to you. I think he's Doctor Who on the credits, but he's not called Doctor Who. That makes no logical sense, but it's what makes sense to me. And that is all that matters.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
I think you'll find.
Well, I couldn't not investigate that moustache, could I? It belongs to the brilliantly monikered Biff Byfield, who is playing his only role in Doctor Who. He was actually a saxophonist. He played in a jazz band or several. So if you can imagine that excellent moustache stripped of its military accoutrements and instead in the smoky dinginess of a jazz club, it perhaps takes on a different hue. The other excellent moustache belonging to the other military official, they're actually credited as top brass in the paperwork, not on IMDb, which calls them senior military officer or something, but they're actually top brass in the War Machine's paperwork, is Louis Alexander, who was quite a handy extra because of his excellent, neatly trimmed moustache, and he quite often played authority figures, although, like Biff, this is his only Doctor Who, although Louis was married to Aileen Lewis, who, like him, was a prolific background artiste, and she appeared in an episode of Doctor Who and the Silurians. So they are a married couple who both did a Doctor Who. Louis brilliantly lived till 2010 and to be 100 years old, whereas Aileen, when she died, was 99. See, I think there are brilliant stories even to be had lurking around in stock hired military uniforms in the back of one single episode of a shot of Doctor Who. I salute you, Biff and Louis and Aileen, and Biff and Louis, I salute your moustaches as well. I love you all. Thank you for listening and for watching, if you're doing that, which currently much later because I'm editing the videos much further down the line because it takes ages. But anyway, thanks for listening. And as I record this, it's before the Sunday of the European Cup final that England got in, as I record this, yesterday. And the last time England were in an international final was 1966, when the War Machines was on. So there we go. My release schedule means that will now all be history anyway, but as I speak, it seems quite appropriate, and I hadn't realised that when I started on this particular adventure. I just watched it because I fancied watching it. So maybe something was being transferred. I mean, I did get a phone call, and there was this funny noise, and I understand. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Pip Madeley, who can be found on Twitter @PipMadeley, and I urge you to do so. He'll be the highlight of your day, I'm sure, if you surf the internet looking for enjoyable things with a Doctor Who flavour. I would also like to thank patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Mark Findlay Smith, Rachel T.S., David, who I think wants to be anonymous. I'm not entirely sure. David, if you're out there and you've just joined, I don't know whether you want to keep your name a secret or not. So if you want it in all its glory, drop me a line. Samuel, I don't have your surname either, Samuel. I'm sorry about that, but I love you. Gary Gillett, Paul Philip Dahlgren, Jason Gorman, Alex Kafajoglu, Chris Phone, Mark Keating, Robert Davis, Scott Pride, Nick Tedston, and Ruben Herfindahl. The music is by Dave Gates. If you too would like to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Does anybody listen to these bits? Am I just soliciting in a vacuum? In which case, I'll make some confessions. I've never eaten a pepperami. I've never really seen a full episode of Stargate. None of them. None of the iterations of Stargate. And I once got left a 50p tip by Martine McCutcheon, who doesn't like tomatoes. There we go. It's pretty much the highlights and lowlights of my life there. So that's the sort of bonus stuff you get if you wait behind the end of the credits. It's almost like a Marvel film, isn't it? In absolutely no way whatsoever. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying join up to my Patreon, patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, or kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can do a one-off payment. Or you can do the thing that costs you nothing, which is to give these podcasts 5 stars everywhere you possibly can, especially on Apple and iTunes, because that really helps to make me look attractive to the passing trade. And frankly, this lamppost in the moonlight ain't doing it. Okay, I think that's enough soliciting for now. Doctor Who fan isn't my job, you know. Being a comedian is my job. So, you know, if you like me, do you like me? Come and see me. on Tuesday in Manchester, 8 p.m, Excess Malarkey, 24-year-old award-winning comedy club. I am the regular MC. I'm there with 4 different comics every week. Now, Manchester could be quite a trip for some of you, in which case make yourself available on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey on the first Sunday of every month at 8 p.m, and we'll do an online show for you. Again, me, the glue that holds together 4 acts from the international comedy circuit. That is absolutely free. Although there is a donation option available. But you can get that at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. Okay, all those plugs are now over, and you can get on with it if you've listened this far. I don't think you have. In fact, I mean, if you can hear this, obviously you have, but all those others, they haven't. Like you, the others, they don't get to savour the outro. This is where the real art is. You're the true connoisseurs, not the rest of them. No offence, those of you that aren't listening, but you're not listening, so sausages to you.